Shiro, an ordinary Japanese salaryman, endured a monotonous existence in modern-day Japan, his daily routine devoid of meaning. Yet he constantly yearned for something more fulfilling. Each morning began with a bus ride to his office, followed by long hours of work until late evening. Before he returned to his dreary apartment to pass the remaining time, he often lost himself in mindless TikTok videos, all while a deep desire for a richer life simmered within him. On yet, his wishes were unexpectedly granted when he awoke in a stark white void. Initially saying nothing, his vision soon sharpened, revealing he was yet opposite a white-haired K-pop idol who asserted he was the Almighty himself. Shiro, being no impressionable teenager, remained unfazed, simply asking for his current location. The K-pop deity then disclosed that Shiro had, in fact, passed away. He was now in a transitional state, a limbo where his soul faced imminent dissolution. However, the god offered him an alternative, proposing to transport him to a different realm. This was a fantastical world named Medius, where we could choose to live a life he desired. This proposition immediately captivated Shiro's interest. He felt as though a lifelong dream was materializing. The god promptly produced a chipboard and began meticulously noting down the unique ability he would imbue Shiro with. Sooner, the allotted time expired, and Shiro was dispatched to the fantasy world of Medias. Upon regaining consciousness, he found himself amidst a dense forest. Overwhelmed with joy at this second chance at life, he quickly rose and began exploring his new surroundings, eventually discovering a path leading out of the world. In the distance, he spotted a small village. His immediate impulse was to investigate for interesting discoveries, but he wisely considered that arriving penniless would likely lead to suspicion and a lack of hospitality. Suddenly, Heracles, the god mentioned, he would possess enhanced scouting capabilities. These skills would enable him to locate valuable items and rare ingredients, which he could then sell for a substantial profit. Confidently, he gripped a stick and loudly commanded the magic to activate. To his dismay, nothing occurred. This failure sparked fear, making him wonder if the god had tricked him, but he soon realized his mistake. He simply hadn't used the correct activation phrase. The moment the third surged, his scouting magic instantly ignited, pinpointing the whereabouts of every single collectible item within the forest. Recognizing the immense utility of this power, he then attempted to employ another of his abilities, only designed to provide more detailed information about specific item. After experimenting with various word combinations, the command can finally trigger his skill. This allowed him to gather extensive data on the types of resources available. Much like a person at a buffet, Shiro eagerly collected everything within reach. He meticulously assessed the quality of each item before stowing them in his magical saddlebag, which possessed limitless storage capacity, and, notably, came without a hidden face. With all his collected materials securely stashed, he decided to push towards the village as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Shiro eventually reached the village's main entrance, guarded by a solitary figure. His greeting roused the guard from his slumber, and Shiro quickly observed that the villagers were all remarkably short, making him the tallest person present. A thought that brought a crude smile to his face. The guard inquired if Shiro was a swordsman or a knight, but was surprised to learn he was primarily a gatherer, a profession not commonly encountered in this realm. The guard then opened the gate and directed him to the mine shop, located in the village center, which typically handled such transactions. Shiro entered the tranquil village and proceeded along its wide central path, where numerous villagers watched him from a distance, curious about the new arrival. Shiro, however, headed directly for the mine shop and stepped into the dimly lit establishment. The shopkeeper, a man behind the counter, greeted him warmly and asked what he wished to sell. Shiro presented a smooth, oval rock, The shopkeeper immediately took it, recognizing it as untethered droppings, and declared it the most perfect specimen he had ever encountered. He offered to purchase it from Shiro for 5 silver coins. Shiro quickly calculated that this amounted to roughly 350 modern currency units. A sum he internally noted was likely more than most people would ever say. He promptly accepted the offer, much to the shopkeeper as the legend, who excitedly rubbed his hands together. The shopkeeper then inquired if Shiro had anything else to sell, prompting Shiro to display the entire collection of items he had amassed from the forest. The shopkeeper was utterly astonished by the sheer volume and exceptional quality of the goods, questioning why Shiro would bring such valuable items to a small village, when we could fetch a fortune in a major city. Shiro quickly fabricated a story, claiming to be a traveling collector exploring various regions of the country. Despite delay, the shopkeeper recognized his innate talent and offered him a commission to retrieve valuable gems from the nearby Ichi Mountains. A task that might also involve encountering dangerous monsters. Shiro initially hesitated, unsure if he wanted to undertake such a perilous mission immediately. However, the shopkeeper's promise of 20,000 for the games left him no choice but to accept. With the deal through, he bid the shopkeeper farewell and began to explore the village. He eventually located an inn, secured a comfortable room, and collapsed onto the firm bed, exhausted from the day's events, longing for a proper battle to wash away the accumulated dirt and grime. Just then, a knock sounded at the door, and a young girl entered, carrying a tub filled with water for his ablutions. Shiro, accustomed only to showers, stared bewildered, asking what he was supposed to do with this crap. The girl informed him he smelled and needed to clean himself with a damp towel, but Shiro persisted, asking if they had a shower instead. The girl looked confused, explaining that such amenities didn't exist for commoners. Only nobles were privileged enough to enjoy proper baths, while everyone else had to make do with water and a towel. Shiro found it unbelievable that something as fundamental as bathing was restricted to the elite. The girl then mentioned that certain mages could perform magical baths for a piece of information that instantly sparked an idea in Shiro's mind. He quickly paid the girl, adding a generous tip, and gently ushered her out. After closing the door, Shiro began to practice his newly acquired spells. He eventually succeeded in casting a spell that granted him hydrokinetic abilities, allowing him to finally take the much-needed bath. Feeling refreshed, he collapsed onto the bed from exhaustion. Though he still missed his modern shower, he decided to sleep to ensure an early start the following day. The next morning, he awoke at dawn and headed back into the forest, searching for various items to gather, particularly mushrooms. Resuan noticed an unusual mark emanating from a bush and went to investigate, only to discover a decomposed corpse on the ground. Startled, he fell backward, but after regaining his composure and taking a closer look, he deduced that the man had been a security corps member, likely killed while fighting monsters. He briefly considered leaving the area but decided against it. Instead, he carefully buried the body deep within the earth, then placed his sword as a makeshift headstone for the fallen man's grave. With that solemn task completed, he decided to prepare supper. As the sun was already setting, he first conjured a magical barrier around himself. He then sat on the ground, racking a pot over an open flame, demonstrating his good sense by preparing his own evening meal. Utilizing some wild green vegetables he had gathered and a portion of a stored meat, they concocted a stew that professed to be exceptionally delicious. Concluding the night on a positive note, the following morning he proceeded towards a foreboding forest, which is densely populated with lively streets and thick roads, severely impeding visibility ever in broad daylight. Activating his light magic to illuminate his path, he steps into the forest, fully aware of its reputation for harboring numerous monsters. However, As far as his gaze can reach, no living creatures are present within the woods. He begins collecting anything of value, and soon, having completed his task, decides to depart. He spots a glimmer of light indicating the exit and rushes towards it, oblivious that he is hurtling directly towards a treacherous precipice, ultimately plummeting into a vast cavern. His life would undoubtedly have been lost had it not been for his quick reflexes as he deploys flight magic to regain control and begins to hover in mid-air. He gently touches down, exhaling a sigh of relief as he comprehends his narrow escape from death, resolving to approach future situations with greater seriousness. And to exercise more caution, from this moment forward, he once again employs his light magic inside the cave, and to his astonishment, the area is rich with various types of ore. He swiftly retrieves a small hammer and begins the work of chiseling the ores from the surrounding rock, quickly filling his satchel with a considerable amount. He notices another ore in the distance, but a sudden earthquake reminds him that his time here is limited, so he quickly uses his variable magic to blast the rock, enabling him to acquire the ore more rapidly. To his delight, this particular ore turns out to be the coveted misreal ore that the shopkeeper desired, so he promptly pockets it, but then decides to venture deeper. Even after another tremor struck some time later, he observes a blue luminescence emanating from the tunnel as far end, which he follows, only to discover an opening. Within this opening lies the most intensely blue light he has ever witnessed. This swiftly descends the rocky incline to inspect the water, which professes to be as stir magical. This stands as his most extraordinary discovery thus far, prompting him to immediately decide that he must bring some of it back with. But he begins to question if his content is large enough to contain the water and if it will start leaking before he could make a firm decision. Before he could decide, a colossal black dragon emerges from the depths, spraying water everywhere and drenching Shiro, while roaring to the band who disturbed its profound slumber. Shiro, however, remains completely composed. He doesn't even flinch, instead reverting to his customary state as a detective office worker who had always shown deference to every individual in his life. He bows respectfully to the dragon, apologizing for intruding upon its lair, but the dragon finds this utterly hilarious, having never encountered a being with such peculiar audacity, and inquires precisely who he is. Shiro replies that he is a mere human, a statement the dragon refuses to accept, as it can sense an immense quantity of magical energy flowing through Shiro, nearly equivalent to the magical power within the dragon's themselves. The dragon asks Shiro if he could assist it, reasoning that only someone with an extraordinary amount of magic could help it in the difficult situation it faces. It claims to possess an Ignehat, despite a very long period, is not hatching, and asks if Shiro could provide the assistance with it. It assures him that it won't ask him to do it without compensation, and simply to choose the water, from which dozens of enormous missile ores survive. Shiro immediately agrees to the arrangement, so the dragon retrieves a dark egg and tosses it towards Shiro. Shiro catches the egg, attempting to detect a heartbeat. Before pondering what exactly he is meant to do with him, suddenly, he recalls that eggs are supposed to be warm, so he employs his heat magic to infuse warmth into the shed, which unexpectedly begins to drain energy from Shiro, causing him to wonder if it was a trick and if he is on the verge of death. He loses consciousness and awakens surrounded by warm water, where another black-haired K-pop deity appears, claiming that Shiro's actions have initiated a disruption in the natural equilibrium of this world. Shiro asks if he is deceased, but the god replies, "Not yet," and with that, Shiro fully regains his senses. Walking in darkness, he activates his light magic, only to discover that the infant dragon has successfully hatched from its shell. The parent dragon appears overjoyed, while the baby dragon finds its balance on the ground, The Elder Dragon thanks Shiro for his aid and requests he name Eddie. In a moment of apparent foolishness, Shiro decides to tell the baby dragon Bay. After Waco, the dragon completely stuns Shiro Bay starting then from this moment on Bay will remain with Shiro himself. Shiro cannot believe that such an incredibly rare and magnificent creature could be born to him, but the large black dragon assures him that he is already exceptionally strong and can certainly safeguard the infant. With that, the dragon vanishes beneath the water as survives, leaving Shiro and Bee to continue their journey together. Shiro and Bee soon exit the cave, and Bee-chin, it is already evening. Bee begins to fly around joyfully, as it is her very first experience of the outside world, and Shiro realizes that nightfall is approaching. He decides to establish a camp nearby and then fills a glass with the magical water from the lake. The ancient dragon had used its magic to establish a connection between Shiro's magical bag and the lake, because the enchanted water is absolutely vital for Bee's development. She quickly finishes on glass, and then requests another. Shiro pours her a refill. However, Bee graciously hands it back to him, because she desires for him to also consume the nourishing water and experience happiness. Following this, Shiro utilizes some magic stones to create a protective barrier, thereby circumventing the need to vocalize the entire spells. He is aware that magic stones are exceedingly uncommon in this world. A fact he learned from a book he purchased from Shakespeare, but his presence no problem for him, because he can effortlessly create magic stones. He concentrates heat magic in his palm and fashions a magic stone that produces a controlled flame for cooking food. With the fire noise, Shiro commences preparing a mud stew, and Bee immediately begins to salivate uncontrollably upon seeing it. Shiro considers that she should be able to digest some stew, and pours her a bone. He wants her. Hot it is excessively hot, but Bee gulps it down rapidly and burns her tongue, which is rather pathetic for a dragon. Shiro is then compelled to blow on the stew. To cool it sufficiently for her to drink, Bee consumes it until she is completely full and exhausted. Shiro finds her utterly adorable, but then he asks her if she does miss her father at all. Bee immediately leaps to embrace him, conveying her happiness at being in his company. Shiro examines her statistics and discovers that she has already attained rank B and possesses some impressive innate talents. He is shocked to read this, but reflects that no matter how powerful she is, B is still a child and requires an adult's guidance. He begins to instruct her that even if she is stronger than him, she must not engage in any reckless behavior and should listen to him. But the young dragon is too doce, and she starts snoring midway through his lecture. Observing her asleep, Shiro musses that he has acquired an enduring companion, though not in the manner he had requested from the K-pop deity, and wonders if the god's actions were deliberate. The following morning, Shiro ascends the cliff he had fallen from yesterday and reaches the forest, much to his surprise. The woodland appears entirely transformed, and they conclude that it must be one of the peculiar occurrences of this world. While Bee begins to explore the immediate vicinity, Shiro decides to search for useful items and discovers a collection of new herbs. Abruptly, he feels a strange tingling sensation, and in the very next instant, Bee has been revived their unconscious, but afterwards, from Pinjuruta is then they can conveniently form himself. This was into the object at from alien and rather dunkle. This discovery is unexpected, as he encountered no creatures the day before. He speculated whether his previously monster-deterring odor has now dissipated. Shiro is unafraid of combat, anticipating valuable materials from defeated foe. Yet, the forest is the sole source of peril. Shortly after, a cheering rock falcon emerges behind Kain. Bee is petrified by its first appearance, but Shiro, recalling ancient dragons, perceives it as rather enduring while reviewing its details. Discovering its meat is delicious, Shiro decides to hunt it. He first conjures a protective barrier, then launches a spikes at the Rock Falcon. The creature is instantly subdued. Shiro celebrates acquiring an ingredient. But Betian alerts him to more monsters approaching from the woods. Turning, he sees wolves with serpentine tail, and resolves to engage them in melee. He enchants himself, enhancing his agility and speed. As the first wolf lunges, he evades believing he then magically hardens his body and delivers a powerful kick to the wolf egg. This instantly incapacitates it. The remaining wolves attack, but Shiro's speed is unmatched. He deftly avoids their assault and eliminates them with strong, rapid kicks. Shiro gathers mad from the defeated creatures, but his annoyance grows as his son spots even more monsters emerging from the forest. Realizing he can't battle indefinitely, B offers assistance by attempting to fight with him. Shiro, however, doubts her capability. Nevertheless, B, with surprising strength, manages to leave him. Shiro aids her by casting a spell to lighten his own mask, an action by Hante anticipated. Consequently, they rocket skewer. Shiro, in a panic, warns her about the excessive altitude, causing a startled Bit to release him. Shiro screams as he plummets. Fortunately, the trees cushion his fall, allowing him to land unharmed. Bit quickly follows, affectionately licking his face, moved to Shiro's subtle irritation. Upon standing, he realizes he excited the force. Given BS incredible speed, comparable to a fighter jet, he thanks her for the rescue. He then requests she temper her strength to next Timmy, explaining his own comparative fragility. B, however, fails to grasp his complex words and embraces him with such force that a few of his ribs cracked. Afterward, they continue their journey toward the village, and Shiro begins brandishing a branch he retrieving from his backpack. He informs B it as a piece of the legendary world tree, Yggdrasil, currently in a dormant state. B surprisingly knows how to awaken the inert branch. She exhales a cloud of foul-smelling gas, transforming the small twig into a staff. Shiro is utterly astonished by this. He ponders if a Mergaterer like himself should even wield a staff, not wanting to be mistaken for an ordinary wizard. His musings are interrupted by a thunderous roar. Shiro instantly becomes vigilant, preparing for battle, but B darts off in the direction of the sound. Concerned for her safety, Shiro pursues. He discovers B circling a tree, and upon reaching it, he sees a disheveled and weary elf. He inquires if she was attacked by the creature. The elf denies it, but then her stomach emits the very loud roaring sound that had previously alarmed Shiro. The elf woman reveals she has been eaten for 3 days, and Shiro struggles to believe the fearsome roar originated from her empty stomach. Requesting water, she promptly drains his overfilled bottle. The hydration provides some relief. However, it does nothing for her hunger. Shiro then searches for the lunchbox she carried and presents it to the elf. She ravenously consumes its content, then exclaims with overwhelming joy that the food is so divine, she feels transported to heaven. Shiro is surprised, having never imagined elves could be so unrefined. He explains that the food as deliciousness is merely due to her 3 days of starvation. He then questions how she could deplete her provisions so rapidly, considering a village is relatively close by. The question makes her oniash. Shiro then traces her, remarking that even inexperienced travelers always bring a lunchbox on their journeys. Angered, the elf approaches for an argument, but Shiro recoils due to her odor. He, with a touch of prejudice and fastidiousness, comments that he expected elves to smell of peppermint. Instead, she smells like fresh manure. The elf, insensate, retorts that she couldn't maintain hygiene due to prolonged camping. She prepares for a swift departure, thanking Shiro for the meal but adding that it is going to make a stranger. With that, she flees, leaving Shiro disappointed by his initial interaction with an elf. He shrugs it off, resumes gathering material, and then leaves the forest. B detects a carriage approaching from over a mile away, a event that genuinely impresses Shiro. So, the vehicle draws nearer. Shiro is utterly captivated to see a unicorn drawing it, and the merchant operating the carriage is equally surprised by Shiro's presence and inquires about his activities. Shiro informs him he is traveling to Torumi village on foot. The merchant is family 10 packs out from inside the carriage. Curious about the outsider, the man notices Shiro as tough and SKFW as a wizard. Shiro nervously clarifies, she is merely a gatherer, with the man finds even more remarkable. As skill gatherers are uncommon, the man invites Shiro to join them. As they are also headed to Torumi village, he asks Shiro, given his age and will be comfortable. The man assures him his size is no issue. Shiro accepts the invitation and climbs into the carriage. He discovers the children are entertained by his exceptional hygiene. When Shiro thanks the family for the ride, he dismisses it as trivial. They explain that mutual assistance is common in their region. Their extreme friendliness makes Shiro feel they are overly trusting. He questions what they do if he were a bandit, attempting to playfully frighten the children. However, the boy asserted he chosen the boy. The result, he explained, is that the building the chimney was left. Shiro is tensioned by the woman a bill containing a magic crystal that activates in the presence of ill-intentioned individuals. Impressed by the concept, Shiro believed he could craft such a magic crystal himself. Hetsen Rechala he has introduced himself and shares details about himself with the family. Reciprocate introductions, the driver is Palam, his wife is Elise, and their children are Unit and Ken. During their pleasantries, B abruptly begins making sound, and the children realize the noise emanates from Shiro's back. Eager to discover, when he consults beneath his coat, Shiro nervously warns them that it is a rare monster and might startle them. Eliza reassures him, stating it is common for adventurers to have monster companion. This encourages Shiro to reveal B. He first cautions B not to bite Anyan. The children are instantly charmed. BB's adorableness, but the parents are astonished, recognizing dragons as exceptionally rare creatures. Palom inquires if Shiro is a dragon knave, given his dragon companion. Shiro clarifies that he merely stumbled upon a dragon egg by chance. The hatching was an astonishing event, particularly for Palom and Eliza, who noted the extreme rarity of encountering dragon knights, let alone dragons themselves. Shiro's curiosity about dragon character was piqued, and recalling the anime watched in his previous life, he anticipated them to be formidable individuals. As those descended, the family opted to establish Faircham. Shiro conjured illumination, before strategically positioning magic stones to form a protective perimeter around their city. He informed everyone that the enchanted stones would repel creatures, but assured them that they would signal any danger. A declaration that led the family to place their complete faith in B. This unwavering confidence in B, rather than in Shiro or the magical stones, left him softly disheartened. Subsequently, as Eliza began dinner preparations, Shiro requested to take over the cooking. From his mystical satchel, I produced cooking implements and various ingredients, much to the family's renewed astonishment, and proceeded to prepare a meal. Using the provision he had gathered earlier that day, he cooked a meal that utterly captivated everyone with its flavor. Palung was so moved he began to weep, having grown utterly weary of consuming only dried meat. Having endured dried meat every day of their travels, Palom declared Shiro to be an undeniable magician, specifically a magician of tasty, prompting laughter from the entire group. Following this, they engaged in singing and dancing before retiring for the night. For Shiro, who had always dined in solitude on Earth, the shared meal team was a novel and deeply appreciated experience. He felt that sharing meals with others was truly wonderful. By the time morning light appeared, Palom was already diligently cleaning the reins and carriage, while the children remained lost in their slumber. With Ben nestled comfortably between the sleeping children, Shiro was also awake and active, sitting on the ground and meticulously polishing his scissors until he gleamed. Elizabeth emerged from the carriage, having finished her preparations, and greeted Shiro, remarking that a true adventurer always maintains their equipment diligently. Shiro reflected that he had genuinely been enjoying his current life, and despite acquiring the Gatherer class purely by accident, he must that he might possess a natural aptitude for it. Before long, three prepared to resume their travels, but this time Shiro inquired if they could take control of the reins for a while, to which Palom readily consented. He soon settled into the front seat beside Palom, and their journey proceeded smoothly. The unicorn demonstrated remarkable intelligence, responding obediently to Shiro's every instruction. Shortly thereafter, we fully awakened and promptly flew to Shiro, perching near his legs, following another effortless couple of hours of travel. The eventually caused sight of Torami village and soon reached its main entrance, where Shiro immediately disembarked. Palom and his family expressed their gratitude for the enjoyable time spent together before continuing their journey. The guard at the gate appeared to recognize Palom, remarking that he always heralded the arrival of spring. This statement piqued Shiro as interest, prompting him to inquire about Palom's occupation. The guard explained that Palom, being a weaver be ready, and his family pursued warmer climates. Therefore, Palom's arrival in the village signified the imminent return of warm spring and summer seasons. The guard also mentioned a recent scarcity of game in the area, which made Shiro comprehend something important. He understood why Palom had been so delighted with his cooking. Shiro silently thanked the deity for bestowing upon him the talent of a skilled gatherer, a gift that man he rarely had to concern himself with sourcing sustenance. Nor money. A short time later, he entered the shop to meet the proprietor who had given him the quest, presenting all the treasures he had acquired. The shopkeeper meticulously inspected each item, but his attention seemed particularly drawn to a specific roach. He then looked at Shiro. He inquired about the origin of this unique stone, revealing it was not merely mitral ore, but magical mitral ore. Shiro, however, was completely oblivious to its special nature. The shopkeeper, however, asserted that this material was legendary. This revelation finally startled Shiro, who then asked if it commanded a high price. The shopkeeper attempted to convey the immense significance of his discovery by explaining that the stone held an extraordinary concentration of mana. He added that merely 2 or 3 such stones could suffice to replace every magic stone in the entire kingdom. Shiro was stunned by this information but chose not to disclose his unique ability. Consequently, he asserted that he had simply stumbled upon a mischance. The shopkeeper, unconvinced, countered that even a random discovery implied considerable skill on Shiro's part. He suggested that Shiro's talents were being underutilized in the village and recommended his journey to the next major city, known as Belham. In Belham, Shiro would encounter individuals with demands to purchase such valuable items, and it would also provide an opportunity to deepen his understanding of this world. The shopkeeper further advised him to consider joining a guild. A guild, he explained, could offer advanced knowledge crucial for his future adventures. Later that evening, Shiro relaxed in his room and began researching guilds and the life of adventurers. He recognized the potential benefits of becoming an adventurer but felt no urgency. He resolved that his subsequent course of action would involve departing for Belham and affiliating with a guild, but for the time being, he would remain in Tormi. Several days elapsed, during which he proposed that the creature he had slain a few days prior be prepared and shared among the entire village, given the local scarcity of game. Everyone relished the flavor of the meat, perhaps even risking salmonella. Even the village's less savory characters found enjoyment in it. marking the end day for Asokir. He continued to spend several more days exploring the village. He continued gathering items, but soon made preparations for his departure. An elderly woman presented him with an assortment of seasoning and speeches for his travels. She expressed the villagers' desire for him to extend his stay, as they had all grown accustomed to his presence. Shiro, in turn, vowed to revisit them someday. However, for the moment, he needed to press on with his journey to ensure he was adequately provisioned for the lengthy trip to Balam. The old lady supplied him with numerous packet homemade meals. A journey, she noted, that would span almost an entire month. She encouraged him to return to the village should he ever feel homesick. Shiro thanked her sincerely before retiring to his room. He settled the way and for the extensive journey ahead and was about to lie down himself when he began contemplating the remarkable kindness the village had shown him. Reflecting on their generosity, he felt compelled to offer something in reciprocation. With this thought, he rose from his bed and approached the table. There, he observed the lantern and the magical mithril stone. This sight prompted him to consider the village guard, who had to remain outside continuously, day and night. Their constant vigil was to prevent monsters from entering the village. Inspired, Shiro utilized his ingenuity and the mana from the magic stone to combine it with the lantern, forging a novel magical artifact. The following morning, as he prepared to depart, the entire village gathered to bid him farewell. Yuri told that this small community had truly become a home to him. A place he knew would undoubtedly revisit. He presented them with the magical item he had crafted, explaining to the guard had it called Project a protective magical barrier. This barrier, he assured them, would safeguard them from any approaching hostile creatures. The villagers were overwhelmingly thankful for such an incredible present. But the shopkeeper cheerfully took the item. He inspected it thoroughly before inquiring if Shiro had incorporated the magical mithril stone, yet then opened the base of the item, extracting the very stone he suspected. However, before the shopkeeper could protest or insist that Shiro reclaim the stone, Shiro quickly departed, instructing him to retain it for the benefit of the village. The whole village waved him goodbye as his journey recommenced. The cool morning breeze brushed against his face as he made his way across the expansive, open fields. While savoring the pleasant weather, he unexpectedly encountered a colossal crab creature. Though initially terrified, he quickly chose to examine the monster's attributes. Upon discovering it was a sea rank creature, he deduced it would pose a significant challenge. Furthermore, he observed that the crab was reportedly suitable for consumption. This revelation immediately made him salivate, and he informed me of the exquisite taste of crab meat. Preparing for combat, he employed his magical ability to fortify his physique. However, before he could even formulate an offensive strategy, he unleashed a supersonic blast, instantly incapacitating the creature. Just as he was about to charge at it, two additional crabs materialized, scuttling laterally around him. He began devising a tactic, assuming their movement was restricted to side to side, which he believed they should exploit. To his dismay, the crabs abruptly charged directly towards him, leaving no opportunity to evade. He questioned if this moment marked the conclusion of his adventure. Fortunately, he proved far more capable than he, seizing him by the collar and hoisting him skyward thus as the two crustaceans violently collided. Both crabs perished instantly, but the peril was far from over. The initial monster animated and resumed its charge towards him, tasting. However, Shiro was better prepared. He swiftly drew his staff and delivered a powerful, decisive blow, instantly dispatching the creature. Later that evening, he began preparations for a substantial meal. Shiro applied enchantment to reinforce his hand, enabling him to effortlessly sever the crab leg before plunging them into a pot and adding water. He then incorporated various species to concoct a rich stew. Once the meat was cooked, they cracked open the shell, and suffered their inaugural taste of crab in this unfamiliar world, finding the flavors utterly delightful. Shiro, content with his accomplishment, expressed to be his immense satisfaction and his eagerness for them to journey further, hoping to experience more of the diverse culinary delights this magnificent world offered. It seemed the villagers had been deceitful, as he was quite certain. It had taken him an entire month to arrive at the vast metropolis of Bel. This formidable, fortified settlement was partially encircled by water. He joined Akui with other commoners to gain entry, but a sudden realization struck him that he might appear out of place. He discreetly employed his magic to disguise his enchanted satchel as an ordinary one, and instructed Bit to remain concealed temporarily. Soon, he was summoned by the immigration officials, who proceeded to inspect his belongings and identification. Their purpose was to ascertain they harbored no intention of causing unrest. However, their procedures appeared remarkably lenient, as they merely utilized a rudimentary magical skate to verify any potential criminal history. As the female officer examined his bag, she found nothing unusual. Meanwhile, they pondered how his personal attributes might be perceived by others. He then understood that his stats must appear unremarkable, given that the deity had guaranteed they wouldn't draw undue attention. The official informed him that he seemed to be entirely unproblematic. However, the presence of a dragon as blessing puzzled them. Shiro opted to disclose the truth. Presenting Babe was undeniable charm instantly captivated the officials. Nevertheless, the immigration officer instructed him to affix attack to the dragon, stating they couldn't permit unidentified, potentially dangerous entities to roam freely. Shiro then fashioned a bracelet he possessed around B.S. tail. This action finalized their immigration process, and they were granted entry into the city. He was immediately captivated by the vibrant metropolis, where individuals of every age and background converged. They moved purposefully towards their various destinations, engaging in activities like purchasing provisions, acquiring armor, and attending training facilities. He wandered through the street, filled with wonder. His gaze then fell upon the distant guild and he proceeded directly to the Adventurers Guild, stepping inside to discover an impressive space bustling with diverse warriors and companions. Abruptly, he was greeted by Arem, a bunny-haired senior member, who extended a welcome to the guild and inquired if he wished to register. Shiro assented with a nod and accompanied her to a counter. There, she meticulously recorded his details and questioned him about prior combat encounters. Shiro responded that his experience in that regard was rather limited. However, he elaborated that he had battled an unusual avian creature, several serpentine wolves, and numerous colossal crabs. Arya's expression shifted to one of bewilderment. She then asked if he possessed any evidence to corroborate his claims. In response, he, rather foolishly, reached into his seemingly bottomless pocket and produced a whole, delicious crab, unceremoniously dropping it onto the table. The table splintered under its impact. Arya, startled, fled outside, while everyone else in the guild congregated to witness the commotion. Among them, every individual employed a unique ability to assess Shiro. Then reassured Arya that she should compose herself, as Shiro did not appear to be at rest. Shiro, however, found this assessment somewhat perplexing. The Fury clarified that he possessed a distinct power allowing him to discern individuals' intention. Arya's aura would indicate a desire to instigate trouble. Since Shiro's aura appeared blue, he was deemed harmless. Shiro felt relieved, but the Fury then inquired why he was carrying a delicious crab. Shiro responded that, naturally, he intended to consume it, as only a fool would squander perfectly good crab meat. This statement, however, scandalized the guild members, as it appeared that crabs were not a common food source in this world. Nevertheless, they proved more tolerant than certain political climates, allowing him to live as he pleased. Following this, the Fury informed Arya that she ought to complete his registration. He then asked Shiro if he had any companion, to which Shiro replied that his sole partner, for the time being, was his dragon. This revelation genuinely astonished the onlookers, as dragons were an infrequent sight in their life, and for an individual to be a gatherer or rare class in itself, and then to possess such an exceptionally rare beast, seemed almost inconceivable. Yet, Shiro stood before them. He instantly became the center of attention, as several guilds began extending invitations to join their ranks. Arya opted to lead him to an adjacent room for a private discussion. However, while Shiro anticipated a certain favor beneath the table, Thaler Rechevet was the guild's official stamp on his application, certifying his status as a legitimate adventurer. With it, his registration was finalized, and Arya presented him with a copper bracelet. This bracelet indicated his rank, the entry level for all new members. Shiro, however, was unconcerned, as his mind was already envisioning the myriad incredible adventurers they would soon undertake. It had been merely 2 weeks since Shiro's arrival in this city, and they had already established himself as a highly regarded figure. He consistently supplied exceptionally high-quality items that sold out almost immediately, solidifying his reputation as the city's preeminent gatherer. Consequently, this led to an interest in job offers. Clint began specifically requesting his services, as he shared reasonable fees while consistently delivering items of exceptional value. He made his way back to the guild once more. He deposited a fresh consignment of magical mushrooms, reportedly acquired from Matheson. The bestman stationed at the counter meticulously examined the fungi. Our nutmeg only accepted mushrooms of the highest caliber, unless they resort to extreme measures. With Shiro, however, such concerns were unnecessary, as his mushrooms were invariably of superior quality. Yet, before the child even be compensated, Arya slipped into the room, laden with an assortment of additional quests for him, asserting that a multitude of requests had specifically arrived, while explicitly asking for Shiro, the gatherer. Shiro gazed at the considerable stack of quests she held. He informed her that undertaking all of them simultaneously was impossible, so he accepted half, while Arya retained the remainder for suffocating. With that matter settled, Shiro opted to relax for a while, making his way to the bathhouse for a delightful warm shower that thoroughly alleviated his physical discomfort. He exhaled a contented sigh as the soaking warm water enveloped his body with a gentle embrace, and even be appeared to be reveling in the experience, swimming freely without a care. Shiro recalled how unpleasantly filthy the bathwater had been upon his initial arrival, but now, thanks to his magical influence, Shiro efficiently reclaims warm, purified water, benefiting the guild members. His contemplation is then interrupted by the arrival of a silver-scaled lizard man named Clay, who steps into the bathhouse. Clay greets Shiro, inquiring about his condition. Shiro assures him he is well, then questions Clay's presence, noting his usual absence on expeditions. As Clay steps into the bath next to Shiro, he explains that he wanted judicially better at this hour, but persistent irritation from old wounds broke him. He soaked the bath as warm to alleviate his discomfort. Clay then shifts his focus to Shiro, mentioning recent whispers he overheard. This rumor suggests Shiro possesses healing magic, having reportedly cured an ailing man from the impoverished district. Shiro responds with a simple smile. He explained he merely replicated a technique they previously observed. Clay then inquires if Shiro accepted payment from the slum resident. Choge already anticipates the negative response. Shiro would never demand payment from someone in need. Clay points out that Shiro could amass significant wealth by utilizing his healing abilities to treat others. Given the constant high demand for healers, Shiro Moses writer practitioners will charge exorbitant fees for service like X-rays will resent him. Clay merely chuckles. Clay asks if Shiro retrieved the notification for a rank promotion. Shiro responded that he is content with his current status and is eager to advance his rank anytime soon. Shiro prefers to avoid public attention. Clay retorts that such an approach would inevitably draw more scrutiny, potentially leading to the formation of adversaries. These enemies would stop at nothing to ensure his downfall. With that concern, Clay rises from the shooting bat and departs. Clay heads back to the reception desk to collect his payment, while Bill munches on crackers. However, the receptionist reiterates a previous question. She asks precisely when Shiro intends to advance his run. Shiro smiles and declines, asserting that he must first refine certain skills before considering a promotion. He understands that a higher run would likely secure more lucrative assignments for him, benefiting both himself and the guild. Yet, at present, he enjoys a favorable situation, earning compensation for his efforts without compromising his personal liberty. Just as he prepared to retire to his quarters, a messenger burst into the guild hall, loudly proclaiming that a goblin horde was poised to assault the city. Instantly, the entire guild sprang into motion, summoning warriors and preparing their armor and shields, while the guild master questioned Ascot. He inquired about any ranked adventurers remaining in the city. The smart, most likely responded that only Clay was currently present. Since the others were already deployed on various missions, they instructed her to summon Clay at once and declared that all adventurers of rank D and higher must join the battle. Shiro observed the escalating chaos, initially deeming it beyond his responsibility as an F-rank, but the guildmaster ultimately summoned him as well. The guildmaster asserted their immediate need for his assistance, disclosing that the goblins were expected to launch their assault from the western flank. Their objective would be to breach the main gate, thus the most effective defense for the city involves preventing them from ever crossing the bridge leading to it. A collective roar of affirmation swept through the guild as warriors eagerly drew their blades, prompting Shiro to realize these individuals were true enthusiasts for combat. While they reveled in the prospect of battle, he considered himself more of a refined type, preferring matcha lattes with oatmeal. Suddenly, two burly, Samohad recruitmen standing nearby began to taunt him, warning him to keep his distance lest they be trampled underfoot. Before Shiro could deliver a witty retort, the guildmaster intervened, asking Shiro if he was indeed the Gatherian they heard so much about. He mentioned that certain individuals within the guild had been showering him with excessive and unconditional praise, which prompted Guildmaster Grit to personally assess Shiro's capabilities to determine his true worth. Grit was also impressed that Shiro was among the rare few who showed no intimidation towards him, and they wished him good fortune. He then assigned the most likely girl, Meu to Shiro, and departed with the two Brutish Mail then turned to Shiro, apologizing, as F-ranked adventurers were typically excluded from such engagements. She speculated that Grit must have recognized something unique in Shiro to permit his participation. This also appeared to be Meu's inaugural battle, given her excessive excitement. However, her initial thrill at the prospect of confronting actual adversaries on the battlefield quickly transformed into terror, as she found herself trembling uncontrollably from the fear and apprehension of the impending assault. She repeatedly flinched at nearby Berge, clinging to Shiro as tightly as she could, and pleading for him to protect her. Shiro understood this situation would prove problematic. Her constant interference would hinder his action in actual combat, so he advised her to relax, pointing only that she hadn't even encountered an enemy yet, much less engaged in battle. He offered her some encouraging words, suggesting she concentrate solely on tending to injured adventurers, as that contribution alone would be immensely valuable. Mu appeared somewhat reassured by Chies, chasing her tears and heading back to the camp to assist the injured. Clay as Laughter unexpectedly started Shiro. Shiro hadn't anticipated finding him in the same area. They began conversing, and Shiro promptly inquired why Clay being one of their most skilled combatants, was on the front lines. Clay explained that his old scars had been causing him significant pain lately, without any relief. Shiro instantly identified the precise location of the scar. They slightly surprised Clay, who then asked Shiro if he believed the scars on his body were sustained while fleeing. Shiro, however, shook his head, disagreeing. Yet now Clay will know to infer that he would never retreat from an adversary, suggesting the wound was likely injured. While protecting someone dear to him, he asserted that the scar represented a badge of courage, signifying that Clay had risked his life to save another, and despite that, he was once again present on the battlefield, prepared to aid anyone requiring assistance. Before their conversation could proceed, Clay spotted a distant cloud of dust drawing nearer, which abruptly contorted his expression into one of horror. He understood that the Guildmaster's defensive strategy must have collapsed, and the goblins had penetrated the perimeter. He instantly seized a spear, preparing for combat. Shiro urged him to remain behind, given his troublesome scars, but Clay declared they had no companions to protect that day. He then charged towards the approaching adversaries. Shiro, realizing his own participation was no essentium, said, retrieved his magic staff, and erected a protective barrier around the tent where the wounded were being treated. He then swiftly used his enhanced speed to rush into the fray, where he discovered only a small, black-weird group of adventurers. They were being overwhelmed by the attacking goblins. The two brutes men who had previously taunted Shiro were also present, valiantly defending their position. Yet several goblins managed to slip past them. Heading towards the city, Shiro, however, had no intention of allowing their escape. He used his magic to reinforce his body before delivering a powerful blow to a goblin. He recognized that these goblins possessed significantly greater strength than a Fusher had previously encountered, so he requested by his assistance, who promptly descended from his shoulder. Beaten unleashed a powerful electric attack, incapacitating every goblin in the vicinity. The other adventurers expressed their gratitude to Shiro for his intervention. They stated that the situation had been under control, but then a high-ranking goblin sergeant unexpectedly emerged, causing the entire front line to crumble. Their ability to retreat and maintain their position until this point was solely due to Clay's efforts. Shiro then understood that Clay could be in pain. Without hesitation, Shiro charged into the woods, eventually discovering Clay engaged in combat with a goblin horde, systematically felling each one. To his dismay, his old wounds began to drop, causing his legs to give way in agony. This proved to be a critical error, as several goblins instantly moved to incapacitate him. Fortunately, Shiro arrived at the crucial moment, utterly startling the goblin and rescuing Clay from imminent danger. Just as the goblins began to withdraw, a formidable hobgoblin materialized and lunged at them. They both successfully evaded the assault, only to find themselves encircled by goblins once more. Clay instructed Shiro to flee while he covered their retreat, but Shiro opted for an unconventional strategy. He unleashed a jolt of energy, disorienting a group of goblins and creating a moment of chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Shiro retrieved the mana-infused water from the cavern and dosed Clay with it. Following this, he uttered an incantation for a healing spell, which not only fully mended Clay's back but subsequently transmuted him into Kaijuno 8. Clay proceeded to utterly decimate every goblin by himself, the team downpour subsided. Clay was the sole figure left standing, and the Guildmaster also made his appearance. The Guildmaster expressed gratitude for Shiro's unwavering assistance and pledged to compensate him for his effort. That same evening, Clay, having reverted to his usual form, entered Shiro's chambers. He inquired of Shiro what precisely had been thrown at him, to which Shiro clarified that it was mana saturated like water source from an ancient dragon's den. Clay responded by stating that his lineage owns compressed dragons. However, he now considers himself merely a lizard, Yet, owing to Shiro, he has achieved a half-dragon transformation. Though he admits to being too apprehensive to utilize it, he harbors a fear of losing self-control and laying waste to his surroundings. But Shiro advised him against excessive worry. Abruptly, Clay adopted a grave demeanor and directly questioned Shiro about his true identity. Shiro ultimately chose to disclose the truth, explaining that he had been reborn into this world after his demise in a different realm. Clay struggled to accept this revelation, yet given the extraordinary event she had witnessed, he found himself unable to fully trust his own perceptions anymore. They resolved to control their day and retreated to their respective sleeping quarters. The following morning, Shiro rose early and ventured into the city for further exploration, where he chanced upon a store offering a wide array of merchandise. He lingered by the display window, observing, until the shopkeeper arrived to unlock the premises, inquiring if he had an interest in any weaponry or antique relics. Shiro promptly addressed the anthropomorphic proprietor, asking if her establishment stocked shares suitable for material collection. She responded by stating that she did not carry such items. She instantly deduced that Shiro was the renowned gatherer everyone had been discussing and offered to procure high-quality shares for him. The furry individual then presented herself as Rebel. She further explained that their master blacksmith possessed exceptional skill, capable of crafting any implement. Nevertheless, if Shiro desired him to forge a pair of shears, he would first need to locate certain materials the blacksmith required. Shiro appeared somewhat perplexed by this, prompting Rebel to guide him into the shop. He halted abruptly upon observing three blacksmiths diligently engaged in their craft. Rebel then confided that she had developed a fondness for the sight of the blacksmiths hammering the incandescent iron. Subsequently, she escorted him to the establishment's proprietor, a cantankerous elderly dwarf. Rebel presented Shiro to the dwarf and proposed that he might be able to acquire some elder ore for them, a material they were in their need of, in order to secure victory in the forthcoming sword crafting contest. The critical dwarf retorted that he would not dispatch a merrygatherer into the perilous menace. However, Rebel asserted that he ought to afford him an opportunity. The dwarf and the furry individual commenced a heated debate, culminating in Rebel overpowering the elder by tugging on his beard, and declaring that he stood no chance of winning the competition. With an inferior sword, the dwarf bellowed back, stating that the man was particularly hazardous at present, due to reports of demonic presence within. The proclaimed that the well-being of his patrons was his foremost concern, which precluded him from dispatching Shiro to the Ruhai Menace. Rebel became visibly moved upon hearing the old man's profound dedication to their clientele and offered her apologies to Shiro for consuming his team. Nevertheless, Shiro placed a platter of cookies on the table, then inquired of the master blacksmith whether he would forge a pair of shears for him if he succeeded in obtaining some Ildra ore. From the Ruhai Menace, the dwarf became agitated upon hearing this, as he wished to avoid culpability for any potential fatalities. But Shiro reassured him of his complete competence and self-preservation. He then produced a crab claw from his pocket, and upon recognizing it as belonging to a bear-rank creature, the dwarf consented to Shiro's expedition to the mine. The following day, Shiro journeyed by carriage alongside the fellow adventurers and rode to the Ruhai Menace, while both continued to dance with excitement, due to her enthusiasm for embarking on a fresh adventure. Concurrently, the other adventurers conversed about the peculiar event that had recently transpired in the vicinity, such as vegetation inexplicably dying and unsettling noises emanating from the woodland. Shiro became somewhat uneasy upon hearing this, pondering whether these phenomena were somehow connected to him, but he dispelled these notions from his mind. After dismounting the chariage, he walked past a horse merchant and started contemplating the idea of owning a horse in the future. Abruptly, he recognized a voice from within a nearby structure, vehemently chastising the merchant for this. It proved to be the foolish elf had previously rescued in the forest. Will was now informing the trader Tatsia that specifically requested a robust way to stay capable of such incredible speed, that it could practically take afraid. However, the trader had provided her with a colossal white bird instead, and the elf was utterly displeased. The Aquain merchant then clarified that their local embraced a broad definition. An air creature capable of transporting goods was designated a horse, irrespective of its biological classification. The elven maiden instantly comprehended her misjudgment in assuming that an establishment specializing in horses would exclusively offer equines. She apologized for her imprecise phrasing, explaining that her true desire was a Pegasus, and the merchant informed her that such creatures could only be found within the Dwarven Kingdom. Shiro merely listened to the entirety of the conversation from a discreet distance, as he wished to avoid a further entanglement with the eccentric woman. Despite their shared trajectory, he resolved to collect some resources during his journey, and promptly ventured into the woods to forage for mushrooms and blossoms. While engaged in gathering flowers, he heard a resounding roar, yet this time he recognized that it was not the sound of a beast. He pursued the noise, discovering the elven woman once more on the verge of collapse from starvation. He offered her water and sustenance, musing that she possessed a truly unthinking man, for apparently having absorbed no lessons from their prior encounter. The moment the elf concluded her meal, she was invigorated and rose to express her gratitude to Shiro. Nevertheless, he found her pungent odor unbearable and instinctively employed a spell to challenge her. She was agreeably astonished by this and inquired about his actions. Shiro responded that he had utilized a cleansing spell because her state was detracting from his idealized perception of elves as a species. The elven woman subsequently introduced herself as Fair, and extended her thanks to Shiro for rescuing her on 2 occasions. He downplayed the significance, beginning to depart, but Phil intercepted him, asserting that elves invariably reciprocate kindness, and that she wished to assist him in some capacity. Shiro unequivocally informed her that her required nothing in exchange, prompting Phil to insist that she would. In that scenario, I came with his tasks, but then flew over to her, and Phil commented that even the dragon seemed to endorse her. Shiro concluded there would be no detriment in allowing her to accompany him until the subsequent tour, and he recommenced his task of gathering mushrooms. Bill shortly approached him, announcing that she had discovered a quantity of rare monster droppings, which commanded a high price, but it was merely a large amount. And on the next occasion, after 2 unsuccessful attempts with ordinary animal droppings, Phil, undeterred, decided to try her look at the theme, opting to bring a toxic mushroom instead. That evening, Phil volunteered to gather kindling for their meal, but Shiro informed her it was their required, as he could generate a hand using magic stones. Phil, however, pointed out that the visible remnants of a campfire could serve as a reassuring signal for other adventurers on the same pattern, indicating a secure place to rest. Shiro acknowledged the wisdom in her reasoning and permitted her to gather timber, yet Phil returned with an enormous, heavy log, explaining it was simply her preference. Shiro expressed concern that such a massive log would be difficult to boil, but Phil had a solution. She effortlessly lifted the log high above the ground. She then swiftly cleaved it into manageable pieces with her dagger. Shiro was astonished by his feat, but his surprise dissipated into understanding when he realized Phil's daggers were a rank artifact. Following this, Shiro prepared a delectable stew for the group, and Phil was utterly captivated by its flavor. She subsequently inquired if he, too, was journeying towards the Dwarven Kingdom. He confirmed his destination, disclosing his intention to extract Ildra ore from the Ruhamina. He then posed the question to Fen. What was her purpose in visiting the Dwarf Kingdom? A wave of sadness crossed her face as she explained her quest to locate the celestial white Pegasus her sister desired. However, She quickly composed herself, refusing to let her melancholy fully affect the atmosphere. By the campfire, she declared herself even more obliged to Shiro. An idea then struck him, and he proposed that she serve as his protector. Vel became quite enthusiastic about the prospect of safeguarding Shiro from various adversaries throughout the remainder of his travels. However, Shiro's actual motivation was to acquire practical knowledge from her. He sought to learn valuable insights similar to the very word advice she had provided earlier. Vel was perplexed by his seemingly minimal request in return for providing her sustenance, but she nonetheless accepted his proposal. She extended her hand to Shiro with the poise and elegance befitting an elf, a gesture that unexpectedly thrilled him. Yen, this initial excitement of companionship with an elf quickly evaporated when Vel began to snore boisterously, preventing Shiro from getting any sleep. The following day, he resumed their trip to the Dwarven Kingdom, utterly sleep-deprived, arriving at the border city. Shiro made his way to an inn, to sample local Dwarven dishes, and Vel commented that it was as delightful as her lizard-man companion had described it. Shiro then revealed that he, too, had a lizard-man friend. Vel immediately began to extol the virtues of her friend, identifying him as the Holy Dragon Knight of the Stolva Empire. This title resonated with Shiro, and at that very moment, Clay spoke up from a table directly behind him. He inquired if Vel was referring to him. Both Shiro and Vel were astonished to find him there, and Clay mused that it must be destined for his two acquaintances to be journeying together. Clay then admonished Shiro, questioning how he could depart the town without notifying him. Shiro, somewhat flustered, responded that he had informed the Goel. Dissatisfied with the explanation, Clay pressed him for his destination. Upon discovering Shiro's intention to visit the Rahamine, he resumed his lecture. He asserted that adventurers of Shiro's current run were not even permitted to undertake quests in such perilous menace. He stressed the extreme hazards of the location, advising Shiro not to proceed unless a substantial reward was guaranteed. He should avoid the menace. Shiro, with a hint of pride, declared his reward. A master blacksmith would craft him the ultimate pair of scissors, intended for gathering in Redinte. Clay was utterly bewildered, finding this an absurd reward, but Shiro was convinced that maintaining a good relationship with the blacksmith would lead to him retrieving his quality cooking implements in the future. Clay, however, branded him an idiot sandwich for accepting such a proposition. Even as Shiro insisted, his scissors were the most crucial implement for Aigatera. Abruptly, Clay announced his intention to accompany him on this quest, as he was already bound for the Dwarven land to have his PR repaired. Shiro was entirely at ease with this development, but then Vel enthusiastically questioned Clay. That if he, too, would serve as Shiro's protector, Seichen proceeded to brag about her own commitment to safeguarding Shiro until he reached his objective. Clay found this notion appealing. Consequently, he resolved to join the ranks of Shiro's bodyguards. Shiro, however, was far from pleased with this turn of events, even though he acknowledged the considerable strength of both Vel and Clay. Their distinct personalities caused him concern for his mental tranquility. Shortly thereafter, he arrived at the Dwarven capital city. A massive queue snacked outside the city gates, but fortunately, Clay was acquainted with the guard who permitted him and his companions to visit absolutely at their entrance. While descending along the staircase, the guard provided them with a detailed account of the city's historical background. Upon entering the city proper, Shiro and Vel were astonished to witness that the dwarves had excavated an entire mountain to construct this subterranean metropolis. Concurrently, the guard informed Clay that the king had requested his presence. Shiro expressed surprise that Clay also had an acquaintance with the monarch. The lizardman responded that he was, in fact, on favorable terms with the king, even if he felt undeserving of such a connection. The guard urged him to chase his modesty, reminding him that he was the hero who had rescued their nation. Clay dismissed it as a complete misunderstanding and proceeded to recount the true events to Shiro. He explained that in earlier times, dwarves excelled at weapon craftsmanship but were inept at wielding them, which led to their subjugation by a formidable demon. This demon accepted tribute from them. One day, as Clay was merely passing through the region, the demon, upon spotting him, inexplicably fled. The dwarves mistakenly believed he had compelled the demon to retreat and subsequently hailed him as a hero. The guard interjected, confirming that the dwarves continued to regard him as such. They had even recently erected a statue in his honor. But Clay grinned, exasperated, because it depicted him resembling Godzilla. Upon their arrival at the palace, Clay promptly confronted the king regarding the peculiar statue, but the monarch asserted that everyone in the kingdom found it impressive. Following this exchange, the elderly king directed his attention to Shiro, inquiring about the purpose of his visit. Shiro presented him with a letter of introduction from the master blacksmith. He then requested authorization to access the Ruhamenes. The king questioned Shiro, asking if he was aware that the menace had transformed into a demon stronghold following a recent seismic event. Shiro confirmed his awareness. Clay informed the king that he would personally accompany Shiro as his protector and could also vouch for Vel as sufficient strength to keep pace. Upon hearing this, the king granted Shiro and his party permission to enter the Ryuhmenes to ascertain the origin of the demonic surge. Clay readily accepted the assignment, while Shiro grumbled. Then he had no desire to undertake an investigative mission. Nevertheless, he had little influence in the matter, given that Clay was the revered hero of the dwarf and had already given his assent. Shortly thereafter, a dwarf named Zambo guided the trio into the menace. Shiro then employed his magical abilities to illuminate the cavern as darkness. He subsequently cast another spell to commit the map Zambo had provided to memory, ensuring they wouldn't lost their way. But his bodyguards remarked that he was once again accomplishing the impossible. Shiro disregarded their comment and began using his specialized skills to locate Ildra ore, yet he could only uncover a meager quantity of inferior grade minerals. Zambo was impressed by Shiro's ability to locate the ores. As Shiro proposed venturing further into the cavern, Zambo alerted him to an approaching threat, prompting everyone to assume a defensive stance. Shiro employed his search ability to confirm the warning. Moments later, two monstrous spiders emerged. Clay swiftly dispatched one with his spear, while Shiro incapacitated the other. Allowing Vel to deliver the finishing blow, they resumed their trek, and Shiro soon detected a substantial deposit of high-grade Ildra ore beyond what appeared to be a dead end. After securing Zambo's consent, he created an opening in the wall, which led them into an expansive, vacant chamber shimmering with purple crystals. Shiro initially believed the discovered material is the Ildra ore Hesogel, but Zambo clarifies that they are actually Ildra crystals, a much larger and more valuable substance. Shiro, however, does not fully the importance of his year. Before Shiro-chan fully appreciates his discovery, Be urgently alerts him to an approaching threat. As everyone steps outside, Zambo identifies the source of the ominous footsteps as a demon drawing near. Shiro abruptly moves to the front, instructing Clay and Vel to allow him to confront this foe, explaining that it is no mere demon but a colossal crab demon. Shiro expresses his desire to personally hunt the creature, eager to savor its delectable flesh. Be joyfully embraces him in celebration, and Shiro reciprocates, declaring his own immense happiness. At this moment, he is practically salivating, finding the crab before them incredibly appetizing, and his excitement is so intense that he feels he should consume its meat uncooked. While Shiro and Be engage in a rather absurd celebratory dance, Clay and Vel watch in utter bewilderment. Vel then admonishes Shiro to chase his distraction in the face of the monster, and it is thanks to her timely interjection that they managed to perceive the crab as impending attack just in time to evade its powerful claw. Chloe and Felton inform Shiro that the crab they face is an orang monster, and that they must unite their abilities to defeat it. Nevertheless, Shiro opts for aura farming rather than accepting their assistance, as he wishes to prevent Onion Owls from stacking a claim oil. What he considers his ideal main course. He instructs B to provide cover, specifically prohibiting the use of fire or lightning attacks. Following this, he retrieves his staff from his satchel, then lets out a wild, maniacal Laugul before applying numerous enhancement spells to himself. He conjures incantations designed to decrease his mass and augment his velocity, simultaneously hardening his hands and feet. He then charges directly at the crab, much to the concern of both Head and Clay. Unexpectedly, B unleashes a sonic attack, effectively immobilizing the crab, then disorienting its senses. Shiro capitalizes on this opportunity, launching himself at the crab and striking it with his utmost power. However, to his utter astonishment, his maximum force assault inflicts no discernible damage upon the crab monster's formidable shell. The creature retaliates with a simple blow, sending him soaring. Shiro, nonetheless, manages to land upright. Fortuitously, he has sustained no injuries thus far. Yet, before he can attempt another strike, the crab shoves him a siege. B intervenes, coming to his aid by deploying an AC attack against the crab, firmly freezing one of its legs to the ground and preventing further aggression. Shiro expresses gratitude to B for the assistance, then proceeds to scan the crab in search of any vulnerabilities. He identifies three specific joints as the crab's most vulnerable point, and instantly conjures Easy Clef to strike them. But then rapidly rotates this Easy Clef, enveloping them in wind magic. Shiro dispatches them to assault the crab, resulting in its complete freezing. Everyone else present is utterly astonished with this display. As Shiro and B offer prayers for the crab spirit, Fem and Zambo inspect the no frozen crab. Clay, conversely, is incensed that he was denied an opportunity to participate in the fight, prompting Shiro to offer a hesitant apology. Shiro explains that a conventional battle would have left the monster choked in mud and blood, potentially spoiling its edible portion. Clay is taken aback upon realizing that Shiro intends to consume the monster. However, his anger quickly shifts to another matter as he reminds Shiro of his designated role as his bodyguard. Nan asserts that if Shiro insists on confronting monsters by himself, there is no purpose for Clay's presence. Shiro experiences a pang of guilt, but responds by stating his greater familiarity with this type of combat. Such creatures. Clay acknowledges this but reiterates that in circumstances like this, a collaborative team effort is essential to overcome their adversaries. He urges Shiro to place more trust in both him and Fire. But Shiro and B offer hesitant apologies for not having considered this perspective independently. Clay reassures them with a pang, indicating it is acceptable and determined that their immediate priority should be transporting the crab out of the cave. Once this task is completed, Shiro and the others proceed to extract the Ildred crystals from the vicinity. However, he informs the dwarf guide that his instruments are still detecting readings from the cave as the persections. He proposes that they investigate further to uncover an even greater quantity of Eldritch. And the dwarf Zambo begins to weep tears of joy over him that Shiro has located a new mineral VM for them. Witnessing Zambo's reaction, Shiro musses that perhaps all those strange occurrences unfolding across the entire continent might be a direct consequence of his encounter with B.S. Fenner. Reason said that his involvement there altered the trajectory of history, and he now finally grasps the intention of the Kapok. Nor when he dispatched him to his realm, as his companions begin their return journey, Shiro recognizes that his self-centered decisions have already begun to reshape the world, and he fervently hopes that this transformation will prove beneficial. Shortly thereafter, Everyone arrives back at the castle, and Shiro informs the king that their investigation was concluded without incident, and that the event neutralized the most significant threat present. The king is pleased with his news but still seeks official corroboration from Zambo, who enthusiastically returns to the monarch. The precise moment Shiro vanquished the crab monster, Zambo then asks Shiro to present the creature to the king, and Shiro consents to this request, opening his magical section. From within, the frozen crab emerges. The sheer mass of the monster causes the entire throne room to reverberate, and the king gazes in utter disbelief. He approaches to fully appreciate the creature's immense scale, then proclaims that Shiro is courageous that merits a reward. Shiro promptly requests the monster itself as his compensation. The king is taken aback, finding no inherent value in such a request. Shortly thereafter, Shiro and his companions venture out into the city. Vel expresses delight over the substantial sum of money they retrieved from the king. Shiro, however, is indifferent to the monetary gain, as his man is preoccupied with Tawita. Of the myriad way Hachan prepared the crop, Clay finds it somewhat unsettling that both Shiro and Bei exhibit such eccentric behavior at unpredictable times, but Shiro assures him that the crop will prove to be far more valuable than he currently imagined. The following day, Belle is presented with a Pegasus as a gift from the king, who would learn of her desire for such a creature. Belle is overjoyed upon seeing the magnificent winged horse. Concurrently, Zambo hands Clay his mandate spear. Belle mounts the Pegasus, informing Shiro that the creature is intended for her sister. Consequently, she plans to depart for home with it at onset. She confessed to him that she is deeply indebted, stating that even a lifetime spent attempting to repay him made not suffice. Shiro responds that the matter is already settled, as she acquired a crab. Just then, their carriage pulls up, and Shiro bids farewell to Belle. She assures him that their paths will undoubtedly cross again, before soaring away. A few days later, Shiro and Clay arrive back in Fair City, where Bunny Girl Senpai greets their return. She expresses surprise at their joint appearance and inquires if they have formed a team. Shiro claims Clay merely accompanied him, but the lizard man interjects. None asserts that they have, in fact, established a team. Arya becomes incredibly excited upon hearing this and promptly rushes out to notify the guild master, while Shiro casts a disapproving glance at Clay. Clay explains that he has chosen to continue accompanying Shiro for an extended period, recognizing that Shiro is far from an ordinary human, and that a sensible individual is required to supervise him. While Shiro remains hesitant about forming a team with Clay, Bei is already fond of the concept and begins to playfully circle around him. After some deliberation, Shiro also determined that journeying with Clay would not be a disadvantageous proposition, and they settled down to deliberate on their team as destination. Following Clay's proposal, they opt to name themselves the Azure Black Brigade and formally register as a team. Subsequently, Shiro proceeds to the blacksmith's workshop, carrying the Eldritch crystals. As Rebel and her master scrutinize the crystal, Shiro inquires whether its quality is sufficient for forging the desired sword. They abruptly begin to shake, reminiscent of an old vibrating phone, causing Shiro to panic and ponder if Eldritch of such high quality presents greater challenge in craftsmanship. However, the two blacksmiths suddenly erupt into shouts and tears, explaining that they have never before encountered crystals of such exceptional purity. The master blacksmith then, the blacksmith, with 120 years of experience, remarks that he has never witnessed such widespread sickness simultaneously, and the event begins to weep, eager to join in. Shiro expresses satisfaction that his crystals were well retrieved, but Rebel then explained their inability to adequately compensate him for the Eldritch goodness. He informs his original request for bespoke scissor stand, Choge is prepared to postpone it temporarily, as his immediate priority is Rebel. and her master to craft a sword capable of winning the upcoming sword forging competition in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Shiro is relaxing, enjoying a meal and beverages at a local inn. A furry individual arrived, carrying a letter from a nobleman, who urgently requests Shiro's presence. Reluctant to engage with nobility, Shiro faces a sudden heart attack, specifically in his kidneys. Kale, however, instructs him to chase his foolish antics, and even the Fury confirms that Lord Belmont is not a disagreeable person, prompting Shiro to open the correspondence. Upon reading, he discovers the letter is addressed to both himself and Clay, acknowledging them as a duo, and Lord Belmont mentions bestowing accolades upon them. Shiro, finding this suspicious, begins to ponder what the noble's true intentions are. But Clay understands that the nobleman simply wishes to sell the infant dragon. This revelation makes Shiro anxious, and he embraces bitterly. He questions if Belmont intends to abduct B, but both Clay and the Fury are convinced that Belmont would not attempt such a thing, and furthermore, he lacks the necessary authority to do so. Shortly thereafter, Shiro and Clay are transported to the Lord's estate in an opulent carriage. As they pass, every city dweller gazes intently at them. Shiro questions the reason for their intense interest, and Clay explains that it represents the aspiration of every adventurer to retrieve an invitation to a nobleman's residence, as a noble's patronage can guarantee an adventurer's financial security for life. They quickly arrive at the Lord's grand estate. Shiro is utterly astonished by the immense display of affluence. The carriage halts before the Lord's castle, and a butler emerges to greet them inside. A group of maids greets them upon entry, and Shiro feels a surge of joy, having always wished for such a reception. At that moment, an insolent young girl, seemingly of low status, rushes over, heading directly for Shiro and Bay. She inquires if it is indeed the baby dragon, and then declares that she had anticipated it would appear somewhat more intelligent. Abruptly, she points at Bay and asserts that the infant dragon now belongs to her. Shiro and Bay react with alarm upon hearing this. Bay quickly conceals himself behind Shiro. Shiro informs the pampered young girl that her behavior is irrational, though she retorts that dragons are inherently noble beings, and therefore, only someone of her noble standing is fit to raise on. Shiro swiftly concludes that the girl is impervious to reason, so he scans her statistics, discovering her name is Tiris, the 14-year-old daughter of Lord Belmont. Pondering how to manage this obstinate girl, he opts for a gentle approach. He kneels before Tiris and asks her to explain why she believes she has a right to the dragon. The girl, with some trepidation, explains that her butler had informed her about an adventurer possessing a dragon, which naturally made her desire it. She further mentions that the butler had instructed her to maintain a dignified demeanor and stand firm when interacting with foolish adventurers. Shiro is now thoroughly annoyed with the butler. However, he then informs Tiris that Bay is part of his family and she should not attempt to separate them. The girl is astonished by this revelation, and Bay's subsequent response leaves her even more surprised. She had never imagined the infant dragon possessed the intelligence to comprehend human language. Suddenly, she begins to cry, offering Shiro an apology for her impolite remarks. Unaware of the depth of their connection, Bay flees over to console her, and Tiris becomes overjoyed that she embraces him. Bay then promptly returns to Shiro. Shiro then asks the girl why she desired a dragon so intensely. Tiris responds that her intention was to present it to her mother. Just at that moment, her father appears, leaving Shiro utterly bewildered. By his youthful appearance and striking good looks, finding it hard to believe this is the nobleman who summoned him, the man introduces himself as Lord Belmont and extends a greeting to Shiro. He mentions having heard much about Shiro. They then proceed to sit down for tea, and Belmont first offers an apology for his daughter's conduct. Clay, without delay, moves on to the matter at hand, and inquires why they were child. Belmont responds that the reason concerns his wife. Clay is taken aback by this information and clarifies to Shiro that Belmont's spouse has been confined to bed for an extended period. The nobleman confirms this, stating he recently heard a report of Shiro restoring Ephraim and ailing mental health within a single day, and he wished to enlist Shiro's assistance in treating his wife. Shiro contemplates the situation, sensing that he must exercise extreme caution when treating the lady, given that his magic possessed sufficient potential to cause Clay to evolve. Belmont then informs him that Tirish desires a dragon for her mother, believing that the constant presence of an adorable creature would enhance her well-being. Clay begins to tremble, struggling to suppress his terror. Upon hearing this, Anbe is unable to restrain himself again. Witnessing her profound emotional state makes Shiro feel guilty now to consent. So he remains reluctant to take any chances. Nevertheless, after some deliberation, he resolves to save the woman as live and agrees to the plan. Belmont guides everyone to his wife's chamber, which Shiro observes to be remarkably dusty. Belmont's wife appears exceedingly pallid, with her bones visibly protruding beneath her skin. Shiro is appalled by her condition and inquires of the nobleman if he can illuminate the room. Before commencing the treatment, he discovers the woman has a severe allergy to sunlight, prompting him to scan her in dim lighting, yet ascertains that her body harbors a multitude of ailments, sufficient to occupy an entire hospital staff. He informs Belmont that while he can address the majority of her symptoms, there is a specific ailment, liver poisoning, about which he possesses no knowledge. He remains quiet, contemplating his creatures, and then questions the nobleman about his willingness to entrust his wife as slave to an unfamiliar adventurer. The woman has already abandoned all hope of recovery, desiring only to embrace her daughter on final time, prompting Belmont to make a courageous decision, and implores Shiro to save his wife. However, this concludes the current video. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.